Hello, welcome to the What Are We Doing Here podcast, where we share the inspiring stories of two completely opposite women who overcame their unhealthy relationships with food and negative self talk and found a path to health and healing through self discovery and natural nutritional supplements. I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Brittany, and today we're going to dive a little deeper into PCOS or Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome. And we're going to start out with some educational stuff from Lindsay.
Yep. So we've talked about polycystic ovarian syndrome several times on this podcast, especially because of Brittany's journey. We never really dove deep into the fact that I also struggled with PCOS. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different types and just really what it is and some of the ways that you can combat the different types. So polycystic ovarian syndrome in itself is a serious genetic, hormone, metabolic, and reproductive disorder that affects women. And actually, 1 in 10 women are
Mhm.
currently affected. It is the number one cause of infertility
Mhm.
in women right now. So that's crazy. You hear that term a lot, and people either don't know what it is or are like me. I was shocked when I was diagnosed, completely shocked.
Yeah, I mean, I was 22, and what's important for me to say to other people is that I never understood it. Up until about 6 years ago, I didn't know the right questions to ask. I didn't know what to do until I started seeing a fertility doctor. Did I then go, you know what? I need to better understand what's going on with my body. And I think a lot of women are in that. We hear it from our doctors, they hand us something to take, and then we walk out, carry on with our lives. It's only when we really start seeing a difference in our body or start trying to conceive that we then notice, oh, wait, we don't really know what's going on.
Exactly. And so that's kind of what I wanted to highlight here is that there really isn't a specific test, right? Because there
Correct.
are different types. And so the four types you can have similar symptoms. So that's one thing. The symptoms can range when you finally get that diagnosis
Mhm.
of PCOS. If you have one of the following: irregular absent periods, high testosterone levels, acne, male pattern balding, extra hair on the face, chin, or body, or cysts on the ovaries
Mhm.
with ultrasound, you may get that diagnosis of polycystic ovarian syndrome just from one of those. So
Right.
that's something that I had no idea. So the four types. Let's start with, unless do you have something to add about that? The
I was just
symptoms.
gonna say, did you have any symptoms?
Mine was no periods.
Mhm.
I wasn't ovulating.
Mhm.
And that was what happened. My husband and I had been married for nearly 2 years and we're not preventing. We were trying to get pregnant. We had
Right.
been together 4 years before we
Mhm.
got married. So we knew that we were ready to start having kids. And that was what took me to a GYN, an
Mhm.
OBGYN, to find out why am I not getting pregnant? Or really, I wasn't having periods either. They were
Right.
sporadic here and there and occasional, but there was no normalcy to it at
Mhm.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So insulin resistance, that is the most common type. That is what you, Brittany, have had.
Yes.
And so why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about the symptoms or the what causes the insulin resistance type?
Oh, what causes it? You're the doctor.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your experience.
Yeah. Okay. So, 22, the weight gain. That's what I started noticing. I was, in shape. We worked out. I was, on the dance squad, the step squad, the cheerleading squad, in the band. I never stopped. I'd been the same size my entire life. I didn't change my eating habits or anything, but the weight just started coming. So that's what made me go, something's going on. 80 pounds in a year, there's something going on. It's pretty scary. So I went, I also had, when they did the intrauterine ultrasound, they can see the cysts on the ovaries. But what she had told me was for somebody that had polycystic ovarian was that my ovaries looked pretty good, that there weren't a lot of cysts. So, you know, I was led to believe that, yes, I would be able to conceive at some point. Um, and then, and again, I'm very young at this time, naive. I was, I'm sure I went by myself. I mean, maybe mom went with me, but I know my husband didn't at the time. So anyway, I did have the hair. I was always like plucking, like, oh, do I have a hair here? Um, the weight gain, obviously the periods. When I was going through high school, they were so bad. My second day of my cycle, I didn't go to school. They just wrote me a note. There was no way I could go to school. And then all of a sudden they stopped coming. Um, but when they did come like 3 times a year, they were so bad. Like I was not even able to sleep really.
Yeah.
So just those things are what kind of led me to the doctor, how I got my diagnosis. But back to the insulin resistance, because that's what you asked me, right?
Yeah.
The insulin resistance is what I wish somebody would have talked to me about sooner. I was
Yeah.
diagnosed with PCOS. I wasn't given a type from the beginning. I think if I'd have been told, hey, you have some insulin resistance instead of here's some metformin,
Yes.
things might have been different for me. Um, so if I'd have been taught, you've got to eat a certain way. If you put a
Yeah.
carb in your mouth, if you have a little bit of sugar, it's going on as weight. Your body is not going to process that. If I'd have been told those things might have been a little bit different because I think in the early stages, Lindsay, you might be able to tell me for sure, but you can actually reverse PCOS if you lose enough of the weight and get your insulin resistance under control. Is that correct?
That is pretty correct. So, what happens is the insulin resistance is caused from stressors to the body, some of the foods that we were eating prior as kids. And I can say for certain, like with my kids, we let them eat the candies, and we
Mhm.
don't want to completely restrict, but when
Right.
you're raised on a diet of high sugar, high carbs,
Mhm.
cereal for breakfast,
Mhm.
those are the things that really affect our bodies,
Mhm.
and pumping out the insulin, and our bodies stop responding. Those receptors
Ah,
stop responding to the insulin, and the sugar doesn't go where it's supposed to. So yes, it's stored as fat. So what you have to do to combat the insulin resistance type is decrease sugar, decrease carbs. You really have to treat it almost like diabetes, and that's why you get those diabetic meds.
and
But
what
what the
I do want to tell you because she told me, I said, this is diabetic medication because my stepfather was on it. And she said,
Mhm.
it is, but you have the opposite of diabetes. That's how it was presented to me. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. But unfortunately, when you hear that, you have the opposite of diabetes. Well, then, so why is my sugar an issue? We
Mhm.
don't talk about the nutrition piece
Right.
that's so important. And with so many health conditions now, we're not taught to prioritize protein.
No.
Protein is one of the most underutilized medicines, really. It
Yeah.
feeds our muscles. It helps to, when you're eating more protein, you feel satisfied
Mhm.
quicker, and you're eating protein in front of the carbs. It helps you to, really satisfy feeling full.
Mhm.
But that's the big one. It's cutting down the sugar, cutting down the carbs, or having healthy carbs and
Yeah.
prioritizing protein.
I didn't even know there was such a thing as healthy carbs. Also, I think it's important here to note what I have learned from you and Todd in the past, which Todd is a nutritionist, those of you that don't know. Um, I had seen nutritionists before, but they had never told me this. But what I've learned from you and Todd is that the artificial sugars that I was putting into my body were actually doing more harm than real sugar would have done. See, I thought I was doing really well, Lindsay. I thought, okay, I'm going to have this little packet that has great flavor and I'm going to pour it in my water just to give my water a different flavor a couple times a day and give me some caffeine because it was caffeinated. And instead, guess what? It had maltodextrin in it.
Right. There are so many of these chemicals that affect the brain. the same way as sugar does.
Mm.
It still causes reactions in your body similar to the sugar, but now they're chemically processed and it affects things in a different way, right? It causes cellular damage. They're really it's hard when you aren't taught these things.
Right.
You go to the doctor, and I can tell you from working in healthcare, we are not taught the nutritional side.
Mhm.
We're not taught about how vitamins and minerals and those types of deficiencies can lead to some of these disorders. And
Correct.
so it's not for any fault of the healthcare provider other
No,
than
no.
just not being educated, right? Because we learn, identify a disease, and treat it.
Mhm.
So that's how we're taught.
And I
But
will say I had the best provider. She's been since I was very young, she's been my provider. And I think if I'd have known the right questions to ask her, she's one of those that sits down with you and stays in the room as long as you need her.
Mhm.
But I didn't know the right questions to ask. And
Yep.
I'm not exactly that girl to go on Google and look either. Like I'm too busy to
Yeah.
do those kinds of things. So it
Well,
is.
but
I
not
think
all.
I
Sorry,
just
go
think
ahead.
that it's important for people to understand, especially women that have just newly received this diagnosis, that it can be changed. You
Mhm.
can reverse it.
Yep. So much of it is, though, you making the decisions and the choices and having that discipline to make the dietary changes.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
can combat with medicines a little, but it's not going to be all, right? We have to make some of those changes. So, yes, dietary changes are big for the insulin resistance, but we're going to get into the next type is inflammatory. So, had you even heard of inflammatory PCOS? I had not.
No, I haven't until you started telling me
Right.
about the 4
Right.
types. No.
So essentially, this is where, again, foods that we eat, food sensitivities, if you have a gluten intolerance, if you have a dairy intolerance, then your body starts to become inflamed. If you have some of those autoimmune conditions that inflame your body when you
Mhm,
are exposed to something. So,
mhm,
what happens here is because it's generally inflammation from a food sensitivity, your gut health gets off and then affects your hormones because your gut health is tied to all of your other hormones. So, all of the hormones in our bodies, your thyroid, your gut, your adrenals, your ovaries, they're all connected. So,
mhm,
when one is thrown off, they all get out of whack.
mhm,
So, that's what happens here is your gut health in turn affects other hormones. And then you start having irregular periods. And so with this one, it really is healing your gut. So, how you do that? Dietary changes.
It
So,
seems to me that, our diets consist of a lot of our health problem our health problems stem from a lot of our diets.
I would say just about 100% of health conditions can be improved or resolved with your eating habits. We're just not educated on that.
Oh, no.
There's so much information. It's information overload with,
Yeah.
is keto better? Is low fat better? Is high protein? It's so overwhelming. And
Mhm.
so that's hard. What I can say is prioritize your protein. That is my favorite statement. Prioritize protein.
But see, okay, to me, just outside healthcare, outside of eating right, because
Yeah.
I don't know, have we mentioned that you come from a bodybuilding lifestyle? I
I
don't know
don't
that
know if
we
we can
have.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I just think that proteins to normal people are different.
Gotcha.
Um, because to me, protein is if the pepperoni on my pizza. That's not the truth. That is
Right.
processed protein, right?
And
I'm learning this as we
it's
go.
more of a fat.
Okay.
So if the fat content is higher than the protein, like peanut butter is a fat, but people
Mhm.
talk about it as a protein. So Yes, it is very, very confusing.
It is.
Yeah.
We may have to get into that later. I know we
We'll
don't
have
have
to
time for that today, but
exactly, exactly. So let's move on to the third type
yeah,
is the adrenal PCOS, and that is actually
I have one question. Is there
okay.
weight gain with all of them? Like the inflammatory that you just discussed?
So it depends. Not necessarily.
Okay.
It usually is more bloating. So
Mhm.
yes, there's generally some belly bloat because the gut health is off and you'll see a lot of belly weight, but not necessarily fat all over.
Okay.
And then let's talk about so the adrenal PCOS, I did not have weight gain.
Okay.
So this one is similar to insulin resistance. So you get that insulin resistance piece,
Mhm.
but the testosterone is low. And this one stems from stressing the body. And for me, it was the over exercising, the calorie restriction. It was really just putting so much stress on my body that my adrenals were burning out and it affected my hormones.
Mhm.
So that was one piece of it. But I also, the fourth type is post birth control PCOS. So, because you can be diagnosed with PCOS with just no periods,
Mhm.
sometimes it is just related to being on a birth control pill for so long. So, when I was 16, I was an athlete. And so I started on a birth control pill because I would have these sporadic, irregular, all over the place, never knew when I was going to start my cycle.
Mhm.
And being in sports, it was really hard.
Right.
So I got started on a birth control. Well, do you remember the like season out the birth control where it was like only have one period 4 times a year?
Oh.
Well, then I went to a GYN where it was they're all just progesterone only. You can take it all the time. You don't ever have to have a period. I was like, woohoo, in college, you know, once I got to college, I just took it all the time. I never stopped it. It was every single day from basically the time that I was 18 to 23 when I started thinking about a family. I took it constantly, plus the stressors. So came off the pill and didn't have a period, didn't have a period, didn't have it. 2 years passed and I was not having periods. So that's when we really got serious about what's going on. And that's when I went to the doctor, and it was a multitude of things. So I had the LH FSH ratio. So there are some blood tests that can indicate, like with high testosterone. So my ratio
Mhm.
was off. Plus, I had an ultrasound with very cystic ovaries.
Mm.
So mine were really ugly.
So let me get this straight because I'm learning here. I'm definitely a student always when it comes to medicine. I think we've covered that. But so that you can have more than one.
Yes.
Because I will say, after doing some digging and talking to some doctors and further talking to my doctor, Jeremy has asked her some questions. She did indicate that it could have been brought on by early use of some birth controls.
Uh huh.
Some birth control pills, I should say, because that's what I was
Yep.
taking, which what I was taking is now off the market because I don't know, but okay,
Right.
so that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep.
Um, and then I think with the 4 types, you know, moving on from that, the biggest thing emotionally for us women, yes, the weight gain is horrible. For me, so is, not when you go to the gym and you work out, you're building muscle because I have testosterone in my body and I'm not losing weight. But the worst thing for me, and I'm gonna just take a guess and say it was for you too, was the getting that diagnosis that there might not be a chance that you can have a family.
Yes. I went to the doctor by myself the first time, and I remember I started to cry,
Mhm.
and I went out. I couldn't even drive. I called my husband, and I just was a basket case because it was like I wanted nothing more than to be a mom then.
Right. Mhm.
And the overwhelm
Mm.
of that being a possibility that it wasn't going to happen,
Mhm.
it was it was hard.
Right.
And I'm, you know, very blessed that I have been able to have two. And so it's so disheartening when you talk to women who are struggling, because every month, even after going, it's like starting on the meds, and every month you are praying
Mhm.
that you're going to have a positive. And it was really hard. And so we only have two. I would have loved to had more, but when I was trying to get pregnant for my daughter, it was the same. Like, I felt very selfish. I felt like every month that my period was going to come, and I was, hoping so much, I wasn't being a good mom to my son because I was so consumed
It
with
will consume you. Yes.
conceiving. And it was just so hard wanting to be pregnant again, but I don't know. It's so hard to explain because it's just so consuming. It's so consuming when you want that so bad.
It is. And I think that, women like you give women like me hope. I think the main thing is that if you want that family, you just keep pushing for it. You just keep trying. It will come. There's no definitive diagnosis that it won't happen. I mean, so I think that's important because, for me, we've stopped actively trying. I think you and I have discussed that because it was such an emotional, it was taking me down emotionally to the
Mhm.
point that it was becoming unhealthy. Like, the crying spells, the waiting on the test. It just was so much of like, I was to the point I couldn't watch my mother enjoy her other grandchildren because it hurt me. I was leaving the
Yep.
room. And
Yep.
when it had gotten to that point, Jeremy had said, let's just take a break. And so
Yeah.
now I can look at it objectively. It's not such an emotional decision for me anymore. But I do sympathize with those women that are going through that emotional decision because I have been there and I do not have children as the result of my PCOS. Um, I may still try one day, but we discussed last week that I was a teacher and, there's always other options for me and I'm
Mhm.
okay with that. So I'm in a place where a lot of women don't ever get to make it to that place of acceptance and that place of loving myself despite my flaws and knowing that it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay if I don't have my own child. I can still have love, so, adopt a child and love that child. So,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Going back to that, when I was working in the ER and trying to get pregnant, it's so hard to, you know, feel happy for someone,
yes.
and you want to. And then I even had an incident. My best friend, she had a son, and then she found out that she was pregnant before I found out that I was pregnant for my first. And I was happy for her, but I cried too.
Yes.
I was grieving that I didn't have that.
Mhm.
And then ironically, I found out 8 days later I was pregnant.
Yay! See?
Yeah, it was crazy, and so our boys are 8 days apart.
That's
Um,
crazy.
but yeah, so keeping hope, having faith, doing your own research too, though. I think that we get so dependent on our doctors and our providers having the answers, and you get lost in the grief. You get so lost in just somebody getting an answer and having hope because you feel like it's completely
Mhm.
lost.
Well, you
And so
feel,
when
it's one of the few situations in your life that you can't control,
right.
and for women, like, I will say this because you and I are very similar in this situation. We like things to be a certain way. And so it
Mhm.
is one aspect of your life that you feel helpless in. And that can, make the burden even bigger to carry.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. But we really just wanted women to hear that, one, there's hope, even if it's not birthing your own child. There are options. But to be armed with some knowledge that there are things that you can do. There are questions to ask. And believe me, this is not all consuming. This is not all of the medical knowledge out there. This is a brief tip of the iceberg. And please, if I said something incorrectly, please let me know. I will put resources down in the comments and in the description box for where information came from. But
while you're saying that too, I want to say, yes, do your research. If I would have done my research myself instead of just depending on the doctor, things would be different for me. Now, I'm getting back on that healthy road, but I waited 15 years to do so. If you're hearing this now and you're going through these same things, get out there, do your own research, ask your doctor. And if your doctor doesn't answer you, find a new one. Find somebody willing to give you those answers, because you cannot move forward until you have the answers you need, until you understand your own body.
Right. Yep. And you have to be an advocate for yourself. And you have to be willing to make some changes, you know, if that's the outcome that you want. So, yep.
Woo. Both of us. Woo.
I know. That was heavy.
We knew this was going to be a heavier podcast because we've actually discussed doing it a couple different times. And neither one of us were in a place mentally to discuss the infertility that we had went through. And we said, you know what, this week we're good. Let's just go for it. So it's been a long time coming.
It has, definitely. But so we want you to definitely reach out to us if you have questions. You can find us on Facebook, you know, send us a direct message, and, you know, we will support you and love you and help you and give you anything that we can to help you through your journey. And even, it doesn't matter how small, how big the request is, even if it's just for us to pray for you, you know, we want to be there for you. But yeah, so I think we'll move on to fun.
Oh yes, let's end on a happy note. Let's end on a light note.
All right. So,
it's me again this week. Oh, I forgot you were doing it.
We had an overwhelming response to our medical terms with Brittaney. So we decided this week we would do medical terms again, and then we'll think about swapping around to something different. But so this week I tried to go easy on her, okay? Because I'm kind of tying them into reproductive health, and she's kind of been through this journey. So I'm like, maybe you'll be able to get these. So,
do you know how long that word is, Lindsey? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like 12 letters. Okay. Oligomenorrhea.
That's pretty good. Oligomenorrhea.
Oligomenorrhea. Hey, that kind of sounds like a song. Oligomenorrhea. I can make a song out of that. Okay. Well, what did we decide urea meant last week?
I can't tell you because I know what it is.
I just need to know that half. Okay, it's reproductive health. Menorrhea. Menorrhea. So like bleeding.
Okay.
How you're bleeding? No bleeding? Lack of bleeding.
Pretty close. Amenorrhea is no bleeding.
Oh.
So oligomenorrhea is
a lot of bleeding?
Infrequent. So this is what you have with polycystic ovarian syndrome is infrequent, irregular periods, sometimes the amenorrhea. So yes, oligomenorrhea.
Good word. I can't believe I could say it.
Infrequent.
All right, let's go again. That one's like, oh my God. Okay. Just give me 1 second. Salpingo. Oh, why is there 3 O's together? That doesn't happen. Salpingo-oophorectomy. Oh, salpingo-oophorectomy. Is that right?
That's pretty close. Salpingo-oophorectomy.
It sounds like somebody's losing their roof.
Well, they're losing something.
Salpingo-roofinectomy. Wait, say it again.
Salpingo-oophorectomy.
I was close. Salpingo-oophorectomy. Okay, rectomy means losing, right? Like cutting it, snipping it, right? Salpingo. Well, it's not your tubes being cut, or it's not a vasectomy. So, are you
Go back.
losing something?
Yeah, go back to those tubes.
Oh, is it when they're tied?
Not tied. It's the removal of the tubes and the ovaries.
Oh, but leaving the uterus.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's like
So this is
half a hysterectomy. A half a hysterectomy.
a partial. Yeah. So this is where they would just, if you had an issue where your ovaries got too big, they were too cystic, they were causing a lot of pain. Generally, that's kind of when they would be removed. But a lot of
Ping
times it's
pongerectomy. Wait, what was it?
salpingo-oophorectomy.
I'll never remember. Okay.
But generally, that happens with the hysterectomy. Like you'll have a total hysterectomy. But this word, if I'd have done hysterectomy, you know what that is. So
I
that's why I
do.
went with this word. Okay.
I know alopecia is a hair loss,
Okay.
right? So
Yep.
I need androgenetic alopecia. So
Yep.
that has to be, is alopecia actually hair loss? Okay,
Mhm.
so androgenetic has to be androgen. What do I know with
Oh,
andro?
you're good. You're getting there. Androgens. What is that? That's the want me to help you?
Yes, because we'll be
Okay.
here all
So
day.
it's actually just male pattern baldness.
I was
Male
almost
pattern
gonna guess
balding. So
that. Yeah,
yeah, androgenetic. So generally male hormones,
male.
the androgens, genetic, balding,
Oh,
alopecia. So male pattern balding.
good job,
Yeah,
Brittany.
those were fun. Those were fun. Good job, Brittany. You did a great job. All right.
Hey,
Well, thank
I just want to
you.
say happy birthday to Kayla. Today's her birthday. By the time this airs Friday, we'll be a little behind, but happy birthday to my baby sister.
Oh, happy birthday. Awesome. And we want to thank you for being here with us, especially
Mhm.
on this bit of a heavy journey. Thank you so much for letting us share our stories with you. Please reach out if you have any feedback, if you have any requests, if you have prayer requests, please let us know. We appreciate you being here with us. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you like and subscribe on YouTube. Give us a 5-star review on your preferred listening platform so that you never miss an episode, and share it with someone who you think that could benefit from it. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.